The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee and innovation through Palo Alto's streets. I sat in my Tesla, fingers drumming against the leather steering wheel, watching the sun cast long shadows across the gleaming facades of tech startups. My phone buzzed with another notification from our product team. The IPO was 3 months away, and everyone was on edge. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air-conditioned breeze wash over my face as I tried to quiet the storm of thoughts in my head. Drake's text glowed on my screen, "Dinner at Saison tonight. 8 p.m. Wear that black dress." Something in his tone felt different, more commanding than usual. The rest of my workday passed in a blur of meetings and strategy sessions, my mind occasionally drifting to Drake's mysterious dinner invitation. The sun was setting when I finally left the office, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that reflected off the glass buildings like digital dreams. My heels clicked against the polished floor of our apartment building's lobby. The elevator ride to our penthouse gave me time to study my reflection in the mirrored walls. At 32, I still turned heads, my Chinese-American features softened by the designer clothes that success had afforded me. The black dress Drake requested hugged my curves perfectly, a small act of defiance against my mother's constant reminders about modesty. I found Drake in our living room, backlit by the panoramic views of San Francisco Bay. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying that same commanding tone from the text. He held 2 glasses of wine, the deep red liquid catching the last rays of sunlight. My heart skipped when I noticed the intensity in his eyes. "You look perfect," he murmured, handing me a glass. The wine was rich and complex, much like the man before me. Drake had always been different from the tech brothers and startup founders I usually encountered. His venture capital firm had funded half the unicorns in the valley, but he carried his success with an easy grace that made others gravitate toward him. The drive to Saison was quiet, filled with an electricity I couldn't quite name. Drake's hand rested on my thigh, his thumb tracing small circles that sent shivers up my spine. The restaurant's interior was intimate, all warm woods and subtle lighting. Our private dining room felt like a cocoon, separated from the world of quarterly reports and user metrics. "I've been thinking," Drake said after our first course, his fingers intertwined with mine across the table. My pulse quickened at his tone. "About us?" I asked, taking another sip of wine to steady my nerves. He nodded, his dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. "About what we could become." The waiter appeared with our next course, the brief interruption heightening the tension. "There's a community," Drake continued once we were alone again, "of like-minded individuals." My chopsticks paused halfway to my mouth. "What kind of community?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "People who understand that love and desire don't always fit in traditional boxes." The temperature in the room seemed to rise. "Drake." "Let me finish," he said softly, reaching for his phone. He showed me a private Discord server, its interface sleek and professional. "These are successful people, Sarah. CEOs, founders, artists." My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled through the profiles. "They're all verified?" I asked, my product manager instincts kicking in. Drake's laugh was warm and reassuring. "Background checks, NDAs, the works. This isn't some random hookup app." The implications of what he was suggesting began to sink in. Blood rushed to my cheeks as I thought about my traditional family, about face and reputation. "I know 3 men who would worship you," Drake whispered, leaning closer. The restaurant's ambient noise faded away. Scott's an ex-Navy SEAL. Built his cybersecurity company from nothing. Images flashed through my mind unbidden. Thomas produces music for half the clubs in Europe. My breath caught in my throat. And Ross, well, you've probably read about his AI startup in TechCrunch. The wine glass felt cool against my palm as I lifted it to my lips. You want me to? I want to watch you bloom, Drake finished. Lightning seemed to course through my veins. Why? I managed to ask. Drake's smile was both tender and predatory. Because you're extraordinary, and extraordinary people deserve extraordinary experiences. My phone buzzed, breaking the moment. A notification from our product team about tomorrow's meeting. Reality crashed back in like a cold wave. I need time, I whispered. Drake nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need. The drive home was silent, but my mind was screaming. That night, I lay awake in our California king bed, listening to Drake's steady breathing beside me. My laptop glowed softly as I researched ethical non-monogamy. The TikTok hashtag Drake mentioned had millions of views. Young professionals sharing their experiences, their fears, their triumphs. I created a burner account to join the Facebook groups he'd mentioned. The stories I read made my skin tingle. Dawn found me still scrolling, my heart racing with possibilities. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and secret research. I scheduled a session with my therapist, Dr. Martinez, over Zoom. What's really holding you back? She asked, her image slightly pixelated. I stared out my office window at the bustling street below. My family, I admitted. My mother would die if she knew I was even considering this. And what do you want, Sarah? The question hung in the air like morning fog over the bay. My Apple Watch registered an elevated heart rate. I want to feel alive. The words surprised me with their truth. That evening, Drake sent me 3 profiles. Scott's military P. Hodo showed a man with steel in his eyes and grace in his stance. Thomas's Instagram feed was full of dark clubs and darker promises. Ross's LinkedIn profile spoke of innovation and disruption. My finger hovered over the message button. A notification from our IPO team popped up, demanding attention. I closed the profiles and dove back into work. But that night, the dreams came. Strong hands and whispered promises. I woke up gasping, sheets tangled around my legs. Drake watched me with knowing eyes over breakfast. They'll be at the Napa retreat next weekend, he mentioned casually. My spoon clattered against the designer bowl. The wellness retreat? He nodded, sipping his pour-over coffee. No pressure. Just a chance to meet. I thought about my calendar, already packed with meetings. I'll think about it. But we both knew I'd already decided. The Tesla's autopilot guided us through the rolling hills of wine country. Anxiety and excitement warred in my stomach. The retreat center was all glass and sustainable wood, surrounded by vineyards. Ready? Drake asked, his hand warm on my lower back. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The meditation session was led by a former tech executive turned guru. I felt their presence before I saw them. Scott's quiet strength, radiating from the back corner. Thomas's European flair, impossible to miss. Ross's intense focus, analyzing everything like code. My skin prickled with awareness. During the lunch break, Drake made the introductions. Scott's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. "Heard great things about your product roadmap," he said. Of course he'd done his research. Thomas kissed my hand, old world charm meeting new age confidence. "Your energy is magnificent," he murmured. Ross's approach was pure Silicon Valley. "Your user acquisition strategy is brilliant," he said, eyes sparkling. I felt seen on every level. Professional, personal, primal. The afternoon passed in a haze of meaningful glances and casual touches. Scott's hand brushing mine during the sound healing session. Thomas's breath warm on my neck during guided meditation. Ross's knee pressing against mine during the closing circle. Drake watched it all, his satisfaction palpable. The drive home was charged with possibility. "Well?" Drake asked as we crossed the Bay Bridge. San Francisco's lights sparkled like scattered code. "When?" I heard myself ask. His smile was triumphant. "Next weekend. For Saison's penthouse suite." My heart thundered against my ribs. "What about the IPO prep?" "Some things are more important than market caps." That week, I threw myself into work. Meetings blurred together. Slack notifications piled up. But underneath it all, anticipation built like a wave. I downloaded the consent app Drake recommended. Verified my identity. Uploaded recent test results. Each step made it more real. More inevitable. The day before, I visited my favorite spa in Pacific Heights. Let them pamper me with treatments I couldn't pronounce. That night, I stood naked before our bedroom mirror. Studied the woman looking back at me. Successful. Strong. Ready to shatter boundaries. Drake came up behind me, his reflection joining mine. Having second thoughts? I shook my head. Just first-time jitters. His lips found my neck. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "you become legendary." I slept surprisingly well that night. Dreams of power and pleasure intertwined. Morning brought a text from our CEO about the IPO timeline. I answered professionally, while my body hummed with secret knowledge. The day passed in slow motion. Every meeting felt like foreplay. Every email like a tease. Finally, as the sun began to set, I changed into the dress Drake had chosen. Red silk that whispered against my skin. Heels that made me feel invincible. The Four Seasons lobby was discreet as always. The private elevator smooth and silent. Drake's hand on my back steadied me as we approached the penthouse door. My heart pounded in my ears. The door opened to reveal my future. And everything I thought I knew about desire began to change. The penthouse suite stretched before me like a dream made of glass and possibility. San Francisco glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, a constellation of tech dreams and digital desires. They were already there, three distinct energies filling the space. Scott stood by the window, military posture softened by his tailored suit. Thomas lounged on a leather couch, fingers tapping an invisible rhythm. Ross paced near the bar, startup energy radiating from every movement. The air felt charged with electricity and expensive cologne. My Louboutin sank into plush carpet as Drake guided me forward. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying that same commanding tone from Saison. Scott moved first, smooth as a special forces operation. His hand found mine, calloused palm against manicured fingers. "You look stunning," he said, voice low and controlled. Thomas appeared at my other side, bringing a wave of his signature scent. "Like a masterpiece," he purred, European accent thick with appreciation. Ross completed the triangle, Silicon Valley confidence in every step. "The probability of finding someone like you was statistically impossible." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. "Trust a tech founder to use algorithms as a pickup line." Drake's hand left my back, and I felt suddenly untethered. "Champagne?" Scott offered, already moving toward the bar. The bottle was vintage, probably worth more than some seed rounds. The pop of the cork made me jump slightly. Thomas noticed, his smile knowing. "First times should be celebrated," he said, accepting a crystal flute. Ross raised his glass in a toast. "To disrupting traditional paradigms." The champagne was perfect, tiny bubbles dancing on my tongue. Drake settled into a leather armchair, his position carefully chosen. He could see everything from there. Scott's hand found the small of my back, steady and warm. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the balcony. The night air hit my skin like a kiss. San Francisco spread out below us, a digital empire at our feet. "Your heart's racing," Scott observed, fingers brushing my pulse point. I didn't deny it. "Good," he whispered, closing the distance between us. His kiss was exactly what I expected from an ex-SEAL. Precise. Controlled. Devastating. My hands found his chest, solid muscle beneath Italian wool. Inside, Thomas had started playing something on the sweet sound system. Deep bass lines that matched my heartbeat. Scott's kiss deepened, one hand tangling in my hair. The other traced patterns on my silk-covered hip. A soft moan escaped me, swallowed by his mouth. "Beautiful," Drake's voice carried from inside. The knowledge of his watching sent heat flooding through me. Scott pulled back slightly, eyes dark with promise. "We have all night," he reminded me. Thomas appeared in the balcony doorway. "Cher, mon ami," he chided playfully. The transition between them was seamless. Where Scott was controlled precision, Thomas was artistic passion. His hands found my waist, pulling me against him. "Dance with me," he whispered. The music seemed to flow through him into me. His body guided mine in a rhythm older than silicon chips. Ross watched from the bar, coding patterns in his mind. I could almost see him mapping variables and outcomes. Thomas's lips found my neck, and variables ceased to matter. The silk dress whispered against my skin as we moved. Drake's breathing was audible in the quiet moments between beats. Scott's eyes never left us. Ross finally set down his glass and approached. His hand brushed my shoulder, sending electricity down my spine. "Your skin's flushed," he observed clinically. Increased heart rate, dilated pupils. Thomas laughed against my neck. Always the analyst. But Ross's touch was anything but analytical. His fingers traced my collarbone with artistic precision. 3 different energies surrounded me. Military discipline. Artistic passion. analytical intensity, and Drake's gaze, binding it all together. The champagne buzzed pleasantly in my veins. Thomas's music choice grew darker, more primal. Scott moved behind me, his chest solid against my back. Ross's fingers found the zipper of my dress. "May I?" he asked, ever the gentleman disruptor. I nodded, beyond words. The silk slid down like water. 3 sharp intakes of breath. Drake's low growl of approval. La Perla lace against olive skin. "Perfect," Scott whispered, lips brushing my shoulder. Thomas's fingers traced the edge of black lace. Ross catalogued every reaction, every shiver. My world narrowed to sensation. Hands. Lips. Breath. The cool air from the balcony. The warmth of skin against skin. Drake's voice, deep and approving. "Gee. Show them," he commanded. And I did. Every touch unlocked something new. Every kiss revealed another layer. Scott's military precision found secret weaknesses. Thomas's artistic soul painted pleasure on my skin. Ross's analytical mind mapped every sensitive spot. Time became fluid, measured in gasps and moans. The city lights blurred beyond the windows. Pleasure built like a wave in the bay. Rising. Cresting. Breaking. Again and again. Drake's voice guided us like a conductor. Suggesting. Commanding. Praising. My nails left marks on Scott's shoulders. Thomas's name became a prayer on my lips. Ross's perfect control finally shattered. The night stretched endlessly. Each moment more intense than the last. Until finally, exhausted and sated, I lay among tangled sheets and scattered dreams. 4 different colognes mingled in the air. The first light of dawn kissed the bay. Drake gathered me in his arms, proud and possessive. "Beautiful," he whispered against my hair. The others dressed with varying degrees of grace. Military efficiency. Artistic flair. Startup pragmatism. Promises of future encounters hung in the air. Numbers were exchanged. Kisses pressed to sensitive skin. Then they were gone, leaving only memories and marks. Drake and I watched the sunrise from the balcony. My body pleasantly sore, mind still floating. "Happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. I leaned back against his chest. Beyond words. The city was waking up below. Another day of innovation and disruption beginning. But I was already changed. Transformed by a night of controlled abandon. My phone buzzed with meeting reminders. The real world intruding. But nothing would ever be quite the same. I had tasted something extraordinary. And I wanted more. Drake's smile said he knew. This was just the beginning. A new kind of disruption. In the city that disrupted everything. The next week at work felt like moving through a dream. I sat in board meetings, discussing market strategies and user metrics. But my mind kept drifting to memories of that night. The bruises had faded, but the hunger remained. Drake's knowing smiles across our breakfast table said everything. My phone buzzed with messages from the 3 of them. Scott's were precise and direct, like mission briefings. Thomas sent voice notes, his accent wrapping around suggestive lyrics. Ross's contained complex equations that somehow made me blush. The IPO preparations demanded every moment of my attention. But in quiet moments, I found myself on that private Discord server, reading stories of others like us. Learning. Yearning. Growing. My mother called one evening, her voice sharp with concern. "You sound different," she said in Mandarin. If only she knew how different I had become. The next encounter was Scott's idea. A private yacht in the bay, far from prying eyes. Drake watched from the captain's chair as Scott claimed me. Military precision meeting primal need. Thomas joined us a week later at his studio. Music and pleasure blending into pure sensation. Ross preferred his penthouse apartment. All glass and chrome and calculated passion. Sometimes they came together. Sometimes separately. Always with Drake watching. Guiding. Approving. My performance at work somehow improved. Increased confidence radiating through every presentation. The CEO noticed, praised my new energy. If only he knew its source. The IPO date loomed closer. Stress mounted like a wave. But I had new ways to release it. For men who understood exactly what I needed. Then came the leak. A junior engineer with access to private Slack channels. Screenshots of messages that could be misinterpreted. The board called an emergency meeting. My hands shook as I straightened my Chanel suit. Drake's voice on the phone was steady. "Let me handle it." Within hours, the engineer was gone. NDAs signed. Crisis contained. But the fear lingered. What else could be exposed? That night, all 4 men came to me. Surrounded me with strength and understanding. "You're untouchable," Drake whispered. Scott's hands proved it. Thomas's music soothed it. Ross's logic confirmed it. The IPO launched without a hitch. Our stock price soared. Champagne flowed in the office. But the real celebration came later. In a private villa in Napa. 4 men. Endless possibilities. The summer heat made everything liquid. Desire flowed like the wine. Power shifted like sand. I learned to command as well as submit. To take as well as give. Drake's pride was palpable. His creation had evolved. Become something more. The others sensed it too. Scott's discipline wavered. Thomas's art grew wild. Ross's algorithms failed. I held their pleasure in my hands. Controlled it. Shaped it. Released it. Months passed like pages in a script. Each encounter more intense than the last. The Discord server buzzed with whispers. Others wanted what we had. But Drake was selective. Our circle remained closed. Perfect in its complexity. Then came the night everything changed. A simple dinner at Saison. Where it all began. Drake seemed nervous, unlike himself. "They want more," he said finally. My chopsticks paused midair. "More?" His eyes met mine. "They want to claim you completely." The implications hung in the air. Heavy with possibility and danger. "All 3 of them?" He nodded. Together. My breath caught. And you? His smile was dark. I want to watch you transcend the Four Seasons penthouse again. But different this time. Charged with new energy. They were waiting. Scott's discipline. Thomas's passion. Ross's intensity. All focused on one goal. Drake took his chair. The night stretched before us. Infinite with possibility. I stepped forward. Into their arms. Into the unknown. What followed was beyond description. Beyond reason. Beyond limit. 4 men. One night. Endless pleasure. Dawn found us tangled and transformed. Nothing would ever be the same. Drake gathered me close. Beautiful, he whispered. But I was beyond beauty now. I had become something else. Something extraordinary. In the city of innovation, we had disrupted desire itself. Created something new. Something powerful. The sun rose over the bay. Another day beginning. But I was no longer the same woman. I had been remade. By 4 pairs of hands. 4 sets of desires. One perfect arrangement. My phone buzzed with meeting reminders. The real world still turned. But I moved through it differently now. Knowing what I was capable of. What we had created. What was still to come. Drake's smile said it all. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. End.